So I have here my freshly powder coated rear subframe, and we're basically going to start mounting the parts to it so that everything is nice and fresh to put into the car. First up are these guys. So these are the big subframe bushings, the ones that are notorious to fail and notoriously difficult to remove. I'm going to show you how you have to mount these into your subframe the best way without having a chance of ripping them or damaging them either way. The trick for that is using some of this stuff. Some tire fat, I don't know. It's what they use to put tires on wheels. And that's what we're also going to use to put in the bushings in the subframe. There's only one way to mount these things, and they have to be pressed in. So you can't tap this in with a hammer. Well, maybe it is possible, but I wouldn't advise it, and it's going to be a nightmare. You have to use a press or something like this. It's a jig we made ourselves, and basically I'll show you in a minute how exactly it works. But with one of these you can pull the bushing through the subframe in place. So it's important that when you're doing this that you put them in the right way. So you have this lip on this side, and that lip has to be on the underside of the subframe. That way when it's tightened to the car, the whole subframe rests on it, and not put it the other way, then it will slide off. So we're going to start by using the tire fat and really give a good coating to the whole bushing. You can't use too much of this stuff, it will dry up and it's not going to be an issue. And I always also put some into the subframe itself. The bushing also has to go in a specific orientation. So inside the car, or inside the subframe I should say, you have these dimples on two sides, right here and right there. And on the bushing you have like a slice. Well, it's not really the right word, but like as you can see there's like a recess in the bushing, and the recess has to go where those dimples are. So I'm just going to put it in by hand like this, so that you know that it's seated well, like this. And now we're going to take our tool. To start it, so just take two flat pieces. That way you will be able to put the bushing almost all the way in, but not at the bottom, because you will be hitting the plate. And then on the end you need to switch to some sort of a piece of tube. Okay. Now we need to screw it all the way up until it meets. Alright, so now it's tight, and now we're going to see when we tighten this, it's going to pull the bushing into the subframe. Okay, now it's become stuck, so I believe that the top of the bushing is hitting our bottom plate. So we're going to loosen it now, and then we're going to put, I believe it was this ring on the bottom, and pull it all the way through. As you can see, it fits in there really tight. Make sure this is centered really well. Otherwise you're going to maybe tear the bushing on like the inside of this. So for the last part, now that this rod doesn't get too long, you could use an impact for this. So I'm going to do that because it's really exhausting. Alright, nice and flat, and now we can loosen it. Alright guys, that's the first step done. So here we have the subframe with the two fresh bushes installed. Next up are the trailing arm bushings. So those really stubborn guys that go through these holes right here. They look like this, so with a metal outer skirt, I should say, or a metal, whatever, they're metal on the outside. And as you can see, these two tabs, this one sticks out further than this one. And I kind of forgot about this, but I'm 90% sure that the bigger part goes on the outside of the bushings or on the trailing arms. So when you've got your trailing arm, it goes like this, so with the bigger part here, and then on the inside also the bigger part on the outside of the trailing arm. Okay guys, so I fiddled around a little bit. It's a bit annoying because of the shape of the trailing arm. As you can see, you can't, well, at least in this press, I can't get it exactly centered under the press itself, which is quite annoying because you have to like balance it with one hand and make sure this doesn't get out of balance and stuff like that. The first one I managed, so like the inside of the trailing arm is easier because it's easier to reach. This is the harder side, and this is the setup that I found that works. So I've got a big piece of metal with a hole in the middle at the bottom. That way it clears like the little stub on the bushing, so we can press it all the way down in one go. Then this is the bushing itself, and then I'm using a socket, a big socket on top to press it down. But as you can see here, I'm not centered, so it's a little bit sketchy like this. I will really not go any further off center than this, but this works, barely. So basically once you have the setup right, it's really easy to actually press it in. As you can see, it goes in nice and smooth. You just have to see that, especially in the beginning, that it goes in straight. If you're going very crooked, it's not okay. If it's a little bit crooked, but it still goes in smoothly, then it will be alright. You can see just like this, it slides in there quite smoothly. But still, we are using at the moment like about 2 tons of pressure. So yeah, you can't hammer these in. Or maybe you could, but it would be very, very hard. Already 3 tons. Yeah, so it's almost 4 tons of pressure. See, it's building up, and each time when it lets go, it drops a bit. You can hear it. That's the amount of force that's on there. Getting these out was worse. So I don't know if you can see it. If you look at it like this, it's becoming at more and more at an angle, so I'm gonna stop now. Because if this goes flying with 4 tons of pressure on it, I don't want to be on the receiving end of that. So I'm going to loosen it and then reposition it a little bit. The hardest part is done because the bushing is largely in place. What's up guys, here we are again. It's been like a week or two since I've continued on our trailing arm. One of the reasons is I wanted to test fit, so do a little bit of recap. So we have a problem here that our bushing is sliding in the trailing arm and it's not stuck very well. I wanted to try and see if a BMW, a genuine BMW one, would solve that issue. I've tried it, it's the same problem. So it's really the trailing arm that is basically, well, the whole of the trailing arm is bigger than it should be. Now, basically, there's only one more thing that I can do. I was thinking, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill 3 holes in the trailing arm. So in the middle, one here, one here, one here. Put the bushing in place, and then basically weld those 3 holes shut and make sure that when I'm doing that, I get the bushing itself with it. So the bushing has a metal race on the outside, and if I can tack weld that on 3 places so that it doesn't move, that should be good enough, or it should be more than good enough to actually be able to use it like this. And then I don't have to throw a good trailing arm away, which is going to be awesome. So yeah, we're gonna do that right now. We drill our holes 7 millimeters, so that we have basically enough room to make sure that we also weld into the bushing and not just weld the hole shut. Now, because of the drilling, there's going to be some leftover metal, so I'm going to go over it with a file so that yeah, there's no sharp edges. Then we're going to put in the bushing and then we're gonna weld it. Two more things before we weld. So as you can see, this bushing, it has been treated like some coating on the metal. I'm going to grind that off first so that we have a really clean surface to weld on, because it's already going to be a little bit tricky because of the powder coating to have a good mess or yeah, and then also I'm gonna have a bucket of water here. The reason is we have a bushing that is a big part of it is rubber. We obviously do not want the rubber to melt, because then yeah, the bushing is ruined anyway. So what I'm gonna do is weld one spot weld at a time and immediately put it in the water so it can cool down, and then do the other one. Okay, it looks like it has worked out. So yeah, it's quite pointy at the moment. So I'm going to grind it down now, so it's nice and flat with the rest of the surface, and then put a nice lick of black paint on it. And yeah, I guess we've done it, and we can continue on the rest. After our little mishap with the trailing arm bushing, we solved that, we welded it, and basically we're gonna move on to the rest now. So what we're gonna do now is install our bearing. So these big bearings, nice and heavy, have to go in here. What I'm gonna do first is with like a flap disc like this. It's not really abrasive. Just clean it up inside a little bit, because we don't want to be putting or pushing the bearing into a bunch of dirt. So that's what we're gonna do first. And then basically the easiest way to put this bearing in, as you can see it's quite a big one, is to use a press. So that's what I'm gonna do, because I've got one available. You could also do this with a hammer and hammer it in, but yeah, I have an easier option, so I'm gonna go do that. Both bearings are done. It's important when you're doing this. I had a little trouble finding the right size, I had a little trouble finding the right size tubes or yeah, or like sockets, whatever you find. And I almost damaged this bearing, but I guess it's still okay. So you really have to make sure that you push on the metal outer ring of the bearing. So something that fits on there really well. Next up, we need to basically seal off these bearings, or not seal them, just lock them into place with a lock ring. So we're gonna install that. I'm gonna put quite a lot of copper grease into this grease here, because these guys, after a while, they get really stuck in there, and they're not that easy to get out. So these are the rings, the lock rings. These are actually reusing the old ones, because I just got them zinc coated, so that they really don't rust. Could use the new ones, could use these ones, doesn't really matter. It will work either way. Now it's time for these guys. Our brake shields. Nice and fresh. Ordered them through Schmiedman. Because basically the old ones, I didn't even remember what I did with them. They were probably so rusty that I threw them away. We are back home now, guys. I've got taken all of the rear axle stuff with me, and the next step is installing the handbrake mechanism. So it's a dreadful part. It's an annoying part, but it needs to happen. It's not that difficult. What you basically need is a couple of flatheads, a big one and a small one. Maybe some pliers might help. And then you need a little, what is it, an H5 Allen key or a socket or a key, whatever. So yeah, 30 swears later, it's together. I believe it's together correctly. I'm not gonna bother anymore. It should be good like this. So here's the result. The big spring behind the lever. Or two, I forgot the fucking name. They sit on here. You have these two guys, for which you need the Allen key to keep this thing in place, and then the smaller one, the smaller spring, which presses against this this knob. We're gonna continue on the rear axle. I've laid out. I have laid out everything right here. It's quite nice to look at all this new stuff. So I'm gonna start putting in just the subframe without all the rest, with also these new brackets. Yeah, well then that is fixed, and then we're going to put in one triangle at a time with the also fresh plated bolts, and well yeah, basically just slowly connect everything, connect the ABS sensors, the sway bar, the new sway bar links, all that stuff, and then also obviously a differential. I'm not yet going to rebuild a differential. I don't really have the funds for it right now because it's not a priority. I've got a bunch of diffs right here with different ratios. I'm probably just going to take the longest ratio that I have, because then when you're at like cruise speed on highway, the longer the differential is, basically the lower the gear, the lower RPM you're driving at, and the less fuel you consume. So that's basically the idea there. And then later on, I will be rebuilding a differential completely, probably an LSD, but that's gonna be probably for the next year. We've installed the subframe. As you can see, those are all the fresh powder coated stuff. And now we're gonna put the triangles in, but before, as you can see, the suspension, it's quite dirty. I'm gonna clean it off a little bit. These arms, they are staying in for now, as I'm not sure yet what I want to do with the suspension. I first want to see what ride height this one is going to give me, and also the ride quality, and then we'll see if we want to change it. But for now, this will do. They're not leaking, they're not bad, so yeah, one thing at a time. So guys, here we are. The rear suspension is installed. So our trailing arms, subframe, all the stuff. Well, you basically heard me explain it in the video, and you probably, if you like listened a little bit to what I've said, there was a point that I had a problem with one of the trailing arm bushings, and apparently I lost most of the footage I had from that problem, and so it probably you didn't really understand what happened. So basically I only found out this problem when I installed the trailing arms to the subframe, and basically I noticed these two holes. It's where like the dog bones go, and it's they don't line up where they should. Like the distance is too big between the two holes, so there's no point getting the dog bones in. And it's then that I realized that I actually made a mistake, and that I probably flipped the bushings in the wrong direction into the trailing arm. That's a bit unfortunate, since I welded one into place, so otherwise I just easily could press them out, put them backwards. But since I've welded the other one in place, I'm just going to drive the car like this without the dog bones. This is not really a big issue. E28s with the smaller engines, like the 1.8, the 2 liter, they don't have the dog bones at all. So I don't think it's gonna be a major difference. Well, we'll have to wait and see, but it's not going to be dangerous or anything. That is all completely fine. It's just one piece that will be missing. That supposedly gives the suspension a little bit more lateral stability. Will I notice it? I don't know. I will make sure to let you know. And that is one extra thing that we learned by doing this ourselves. So yeah, sometimes stuff like that happens. For the rest, a quick update on the car. Basically, I haven't really done anything anymore. Due to basically I'm moving. So as I said, I have a job at the coast, and here at home with my parents, it's like in the middle of the country. And yeah, so every year or month I have like less and less time to really work on the car, which is unfortunate. Still, I do hope this car will be on the road by the end of the year. That's still the goal. I'm just going to plan a few weekends where I really just only work on the car, because otherwise it just does not advance, because I have a million and five other things to do. So yeah, you guys probably know how life goes. The car is still on the lift and the suspension is on. I continued a little bit on like on the interior. I did some little bits and pieces, but not nothing major, nothing worth making a video about. So yeah, I'm gonna stop rambling now. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you tune in for the next one. And I will promise that I'm gonna really try my best to make some progress on this car, because it's been going way too slow. Have a nice day, everyone.